interest of time, because I'd love to be able to open it up for questions, I'm just going to ask one question of all of you, and then I have one at the very end. So we'll get to you in just a moment, but I'm going to go across the board. And actually, I'm going to go online first. Antonella. So what is one innovation in women's health research that has the fastest global impact? Now, this can be something that's outside of your purview of what you're fighting for, but what is an example of how you would like what you're fighting for, what your passion is for, and how could you implement that to get the innovation to go across borders?
I think that as old as mankind is, the innovation goes along with education. So if we want to innovate, we need to educate to the unmet need, multiple stakeholders, including investors, and make them understand that it's not just about the return of investment, but also the unmet medical need and how the planet can benefit in the way forward. I think that if we want to innovate, we have to also come up with some regulatory pathways that speed up innovation in this specific field, whether we should be inspired by how it was done for orphan diseases, or if there is additional ways. I'm confident that regulators from around the world are currently sitting together to reflect on how to speed up innovation in this field. So to just come to a conclusion, I think innovation is about empowering people with knowledge and with education, make them reflect on what needs to be done, and then ideas will be generated within laboratories by those scientists that come from those underserved and underrepresented communities. So if we want to innovate for a given geography, I think that we have to empower local scientists, local thinkers, to understand how to come up for a solution for their people, and then, of course, broaden up to a global audience. I think that we do often the opposite. I live in Europe, and how research works in Europe is that we have great innovation, which but serves always Europeans at the end. We first enter the US market for good reason, and we know which are those reasons. Of course, the market is bigger, there are higher margin of return for investors, absolutely fine, but leave people behind. So we should try to harmonize access to innovations around the globe to have, unmet needs prioritized, and give incentive for both developers, both investors, as well as regulatory paths that facilitate the access of this innovation on the market.
I'm going to go to you, Delali.
So in terms of the question, so your same question?
Yes.
Okay. And so if the question is around, how do we accelerate on innovation, correct? So just in terms of...
Is there an innovation example or an innovation that's going on right now that you would like to replicate with what you're trying to do? Antonella talked about getting the word out, and that's part of what you do as well.
Yeah. So I was actually going to capitalize on some of what Dr. Antonella discussed. So again, in terms of really being able, I think there's a dual approach in terms of innovation. From the innovator side, and certainly as an organization like DNDi, one of the pieces that we really critically tried to think about from the beginning of early discovery all the way through implementation from the product side is how do we integrate the patient voice along the way? And oftentimes, you can lose that aspect of the patient voice. And so you really have to almost in some ways integrate and work backwards. Be able to ensure that you're really being able to capture, well, what are the concerns within the community? How do you be able to build out from each and every step what your target product profile is, but with the voice of the community in there? When you are getting to a place where there's an opportunity to do clinical trials, what is it in terms of the needs, the setup, the local regulatory bodies, as already mentioned a little bit earlier, because one of the challenges that, in terms of putting on the local context, one of the challenges that we found in being able to actually execute and do some of the studies that I mentioned a little bit earlier was understanding the ethics committees and what was actually also needed at that regulatory level with the institutions we were partnering with. So partnership becomes very critical to understand very much within the local level and context, and what are some things that unexpected that you might not anticipate. So in terms of really being able to flesh that out and bring the community along in the journey pathway to innovation, I think that's where you'll have much greater success in what we've been able to see as DNDi.
Nice. Thank you. Zainab.
Yeah, again, Antoinette said most of the things that sitting in my chair from an LMIC point of view. If we think about innovation, a lot of the innovations come from research. Research is not inclusive of many low-middle income countries as well as women. So when the solutions come, they're Eurocentric, as she rightly said. What I would like to see is more involvement of all the countries, regardless of their geographical location. Our data tends to be quite weak, but we can be supported to improve on that. So if we can work more with the local players, the scientists, the researchers, even the policymakers, the lawmakers, so that we can build a stronger system. And the system doesn't just mean the health system. Education and awareness is really a critical part of how we start to deliver solutions to low-middle income countries. The HPV vaccine, I can answer the question by saying, oh yes, I want to see more HPV vaccine and the ROI that it has and the lives that it will save. But we create the vaccine, we deliver it to different countries of the world, including the LMICs, but we don't put as much effort into how we're going to implement it. We don't stop to think that in my country, Nigeria, there are over 7 million girls that are out of school, and we deliver a vaccine that is based on distribution through a school system. Automatically, 50% of the girls are excluded. So we need to contextualize our innovations and make sure that all the geographical areas of the world are more inclusive.
Thank you.
So a lot of great advice and statements. I agree with all of that. I think I'll just take one other angle to it. Regulatory pathway was already mentioned, of course, and that's front and center, I think. I would say slow down to go fast. I think that's critical. What I've seen on a lot of innovation projects that will come, the emphasis is on speed and let's get it out quick. Now, obviously, for some great reasons, it's because patients are suffering, and we want to get the innovation out there so that people can actually benefit from that. However, speed sometimes is not your friend in that case. So I say slow down to go fast because, first of all, do you have the right patient experience that is part of the clinical data and supportive data? Are there additional studies you can do that would augment and complement the research that maybe you already have or it's already in plan regarding the patient experience? Because this is extremely important. And I think with those, from an advocacy point, what I've learned just recently this summer is that when it comes to speaking with regulators, when it comes to speaking with policymakers, they may buy into research data and all of that, but they might not feel it as compellingly. You gotta have that story that speaks about that patient experience. Oh, this product won't be available, diagnostic won't be available. It often doesn't hit you in the heart if you have a real patient experience. This person died because they didn't get access quickly enough. This person is suffering needlessly because they don't have the proper diagnostic to actually get them on the therapeutic that is actually specific for them. So I think all in all, that can also add to accelerating the pathway in your conversations with regulators across the globe, and also getting together some harmonized pathways in an accelerated way, much more meaningfully, and get the ecosystem you need to get it out there.
Great, thank you. Okay, so could we get a couple of questions, real brief questions if possible, to state your name and your question, and we will get it answered. And they're coming around with the microphone.
So my name is Dr. Kadzarechta, and I'm working as expert advisor and evaluator for European Commission. I'm specialized in healthcare innovation and also mentor and evaluator in Women Tech EU call, as well as advisor for a couple of startups, especially focused on women's health. So my question would be actually, and the esteemed panel addressed a lot of topics really in an excellent way, but how can we bring a real impact? There is a huge disconnection between what actually women need around the world, especially in these underserved areas, and women founders who are maybe sometimes having amazing ideas for fantastic technology and new innovation in breast cancer detection, which was the topic of my PhD, and I'm very, very much passionate about that. But also other topics when it comes to pregnancy, when it comes to brain health. So how can we bring these kind of areas together? Women who are really
The surveys that we wanted to be able to do, get the quantitative information, and then the qualitative, because you have to be able to do follow-up. Sometimes you don't have the right contact information, and sometimes people don't want to come back. How are you going to re-engage? You can't do that from a distance. And so the ways that you're going to be able to continue to ensure engagement is really around how are your local advocates, your community board members, your advocates around the room who are championing with you at the local level to be able to ensure that you have that coming through. And this goes without saying, I mean, I think we've all said it, many in this room already know it. You have to, how then do you translate? It's not just about translating preclinical in my world to innovative treatments, but also how are you translating your policy, your guidelines into practice, right? And that's gonna come through that advocacy component. Advocacy, advocacy, advocacy from beginning to end.
Absolutely, and I'll just add to that something I heard from the women's health advocates over the summer, is that part of regulatory government agency, why not include women's health experts as part of the regulatory reviewing body, right? So such that there are experts in oncology or other areas that are in the regulatory framework of the FDA, for example. We know that science is emerging even more on women's health. There's so much that we still do not fully understand, but there's so much more that we could know. So why not have women's health experts as part of those reviewing body so that you're not always re-explaining the science, the basic science of women's health. It's already known. It's also already known within that regulatory body what all women's health innovations are coming across, so that there can be kind of a comparative analysis or a much more thoughtful conversation with sponsors on how that innovation can be made better, as well as the data that goes along with it.
Antonella, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment, and thank you for mentioning the regulatory path. I worked as a regulator for 4 years. I was working for the Swiss Agency for Therapeutic Products Approval. I applaud the agency in Switzerland that exactly did what Zina suggested, appointing an expert on women's health in the gremium of those who will decide whether a drug is safe or whether a drug is working also on women. But nevertheless, there is one major aspect that has to be taken into account. I mean, regulators can be educated because there is a scientific advice that can be asked timely to consult with them. Nevertheless, it's an opportunity to educate not only the drug developer, meaning, or the innovator developer, but also the other way around. We have to educate regulators as well, because they are colleagues like us. They don't sit into innovation. We do the innovation. So the scientific advice, usually it's a mutual exchange to educate both parties. But the main problem remains. I'll give you 2 examples. One comes from our own research that has just been published on Alzheimer's disease. And I think that this is a problem that it's independent of the geography. Our patient survey is conducted on Alzheimer, people living with Alzheimer's disease or their caregivers, the beginning of the disease. So let's say mild cognitive impairment showed that women access specialized care less than a man will do. And surprisingly, women knew less about Alzheimer's disease than a man will know, which again goes back to the fact that women have in general less education on disease and opportunities, but also that there is an intrinsic bias in how science and medicine is done. Doctors are biased, researchers are biased, our data are biased, whether we like it or not. I give you the other part of the example. A publication on Cell, published last year, September 2024, big headline, metformin, which is a drug we all know for treating diabetes, can reduce neurodegeneration into monkeys. Now, that's a great news, reduce neurodegeneration of 7 years. This is a breaking news, in my opinion, because it shows that metformin can do quite a lot on the animal model, which was monkeys. But what if I tell you that about those 20 monkeys, not even one female monkey was included? So the problem starts at day 0 in the lab. So we can do as much as awareness we want among policymakers and regulators, and actually a lot is done finally, but the major unsolved problem is to think from day 0 to all the startups, actually to all the investors. When an investor meets a startup, the first question should be, is it good for both men and women? Is it good for all ethnicity in the world? Because there is also the other big elephant in the room, which is ethnicity, which is not at all addressed in clinical development and novel technology development right now. And with this, I'm done.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Let's see, there we go. Delali, hi, I'm nice to see you at this point. I'm Andrea Lucard. I'm one of Antonella's advisors, but I was 15 years at MMV. So Medicines for Malaria Venture is a sister organization to DNDi, and one of the ways that my own pathway of getting involved in women's health was that when you're dealing with malaria medicines, the people who die first from malaria are children under the age of 5. The second group of people who die are pregnant women. And it's usually first pregnancy pregnant women, which is to say pregnant girls. We're talking about people the ages 11 through 15, say 17. And in the diseases of poverty space, we had the same kind of response, which was to say it's just too difficult. We can't do it ethically. We can't manage it, and so forth. And nevertheless, because we were a publicly funded foundation, that work began to happen. And Delali, I would specifically like you to address the possibility that work that's happening in the neglected disease space and the diseases of poverty actually has implications coming backwards into the more developed countries, both in regulatory and the potential for regulatory organizations to really come forward, and how we can learn backwards as opposed to saying it's all coming from the north to the south. How about the other way around? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and it's a very, very interesting question. And actually, you probably could also speak to some of this as well, too. But one of the pieces, and this kind of gets a little bit to what I was touching a little bit earlier on around Chagas disease in particular being endemic within the United States. But whereas a lot of the research experience, we do have a number of experts who are within the region here, but a number of experts who are been working within other areas where it's been largely endemic for some time. And so one of the pieces that I think we're probably can pick up from, this kind of goes back to the regulatory piece, is how do you kind of partner to be able to build up that expertise in a way that you're working with the regulators much earlier in the process so that you can bring certain things to market faster. So DNDi has worked, for instance, usually through like with the WHO and other regulators to be able to disseminate information at the local level, working with local regulators to bring some of these medications and from an access perspective faster. And so that's one of the areas where it's sometimes when we're talking about whether it's oncology medications or other NCDs that DNDi doesn't work on, but given whether you're working with the FDA or other areas, it can be a little bit slower in the process depending on whether or not that process has other collaborators with it. But because you're kind of forced with limited resources to work with a large number of collaborators, you have to work at an accelerated, faster pace to be able to bring innovation faster. DNDi works from a principle and working with MMV in the past. How do you look at areas of open science and being able to utilize data in an open fashion? And so that's one of the areas where I think because we've been able to accelerate with bringing treatments faster, whether you're talking about repurposed or new chemical entities, but you can't do that by yourself. We have a partnership model where we're working with not just the regulator, we're working with academia, we're working with private sector, in pharma, we're working with as number of many people as we can in a way that allows for open science and open data sharing so that we can come and bring products faster together. And I think sometimes having come and worked in private sector, sometimes people can get very narrow in their innovation and wanting to be able to kind of in some way shield their data. But I think there's opportunities that we can still talk about IP and be innovative in IP, but still be able to accelerate in a faster way and in a meaningful way through partnership to getting the innovation that we want to see faster and that product faster when we collaborate and share our data more openly.
Zainab, did you want to share your thoughts, Rule? No? Okay, you got it. Okay. One more question?
We had an online question, okay,
Oh.
which was for somebody from SWHR. So that obviously that's going to have to take place in the open session. But the question just for the audience for a second was whether the Society for Women's Health Research would effectively endorse innovation. So we'll come back to that. But one of the things I would say is that health AI that I referenced first in the morning, one of the things that it's doing is it's actually publishing a list of health AI solutions that have been approved by ministries of health in various countries around the world. And I'm only raising that because so many of the possible solutions in the future are going to be based on some form of AI, even if it's AI cleaning data, filling gaps. That's an interesting development to watch as countries start to actually effectively curate some of the solutions and obviously if you think about the pandemic and COVID, one of the concerns was, well, who's the trusted source of information that was coming out of people like Google? So this whole idea of who curates approved innovation is going to be an important area, I feel. But we'll come back to that in the open discussion.
Great. We have 1 minute.
Yeah, hi. My name is Shubha. I work with an organization called Sati in India. We work on infectious diseases. This question is for the expert from Nigeria. In your capacity as an advisor to the government, were you able to influence the government to expand the package of services right now beyond RCH? And if so, how you did it? And if you can also explain the research framework or research infrastructure in Nigeria, because we are talking about including listening to women, including their voices, and including LMIC population in research. If you can talk about what you're doing at Nigeria and also your ideas on how we can be included as a part of research at the international level. Thank you.
Okay, so with regards to convincing the government to widen the scope and to be more inclusive, it's an ongoing process. I cannot sit here and take the credit and say, yes, I've been able to do this and do that. But there are steps. Every year you find new steps. Every budget, there's more budgetary allocation for women's health. There's a lot going on both within country and outside from partners and all the global funders, with especially regarding maternal health right now in Nigeria, due to the very high rate of maternal mortality that the country has. So there's a lot of focus on that now, and we do advocates, all the work starts from advocacy, whether you're doing it in country or outside, at a local to the government. We have to be advocates in our own way and showcase the problems that women have. And a way, how can we be more inclusive, which might answer my own perspective of the last question a bit, is there are structures that guide the innovation and research processes that go on in country, but most of it goes institution to institution. So if somebody from MSK wants to run here in New York, wants to run a research on cervical cancer, they would go to an institution, a tertiary institution in Nigeria, get all the approvals that they need from the regulatory agencies and carry out their research. But what we can do better is to provide, very clear terms that the funding should include LMICs more. When we're carrying out researches on innovations here in the global north, then we should stipulate that a certain percentage of, marginalized populations, racial minorities, and so on, should be included, not just LMICs. So those are ways, and for those who want to be more inclusive or more involved, then my suggestion would be your first port of call should be to tertiary institutions, the regulatory bodies that control that. They exist and can be quite helpful as well.
Thank you, everyone. That was wonderful. We had some great themes here, and we need another open session, but unfortunately, everybody else, we have a lot for you today. So please give a hand to our wonderful experts here and online. We learned a lot about innovation, and thank you so much.